Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to day one of DrupalCon. How are we feeling? Are we good? I know that food is settling in, right? It's hitting you hard, that liver is doing overtime, and I know the session just after lunch isn't the most grateful one because people tend to nod off. And to be perfectly honest, while it is slightly annoying, I will not hold it against you. So if you want to take a nap, be my guest. But for those who are interested in hearing more about caching and about Varnish, I'm the guy to tell you a little thing about it. So, hello everyone. My name is Thijs, which is one of those more annoying Belgian names. You've heard a couple, right? There's no shortage of Belgians in the Drupal community. I happen to hold the title of the Technical Evangelist at Varnish Software, which means I do a lot of talking. I'm a very talkative person, and luckily I found a job where I get paid to do that. I'm also the author of Varnish 6 by Example, which is a book I wrote during the COVID lockdowns. It's a 778-pager, which goes to show that the lockdowns were quite long. I have one free copy. My dear colleague Cynthia, who leads our APAC division here, is now rushing to the stage to bring that copy of the book. Look at her. Ta-da! So what we're going to do is we're going to take that book, we're going to put it front and center, and in less than 15 minutes, I'm going to walk off stage, and nature will sort it out. If someone is interested, please grab the book. So I work as a tech evangelist for Varnish Software. Who's heard of that company? You should see everyone's hands because even if you don't know our technology, we're a sponsor of the event. I compiled that nifty little video in the beginning talking about certain of those features. And if you ask us what we do, we're a company that builds software-defined web acceleration and content delivery solutions with a very strong emphasis on the software-defined aspect. So we're software, you can install us anywhere you want. You can do that on regular service using RPM and Debian packages. You can run us in the cloud. We have official machine images on Azure, on AWS, on Google, on Oracle, you name it. If you're more in tune with the Docker and Kubernetes world, we have official Helm charts, we have official Docker images, so use those. Despite us being a company that builds that type of software for different types of organizations, I know and I acknowledge that most of you know us from our open source project called Varnish Cache, which we're a company that spun out of that to not only provide professional support, but also a commercial offering. And I would have the audacity, please correct me if I'm wrong, to say that we're a first-class citizen in the Drupal world. Like if you go to the Drupal documentation page on Varnish, and I listened closely what Dries had to say, so maybe we should contribute to that and try to keep it up to date. It's actually a tutorial I wrote that is linked here, so that kind of feels good. So we're part of that community, and we have been for a long time. And also by sponsoring this event, it's a sort of a reacquaintance to saying, hey, we're out here, we're ready to make your stuff faster. And we do this by positioning ourselves as a sort of reverse caching proxy. That means we are bang in the middle between your users and your Drupal. And we perform two things. We improve quality of experience and quality of service. Quality of experience means by caching the output of your Drupal site and delivering it super fast, while the latency drops and users are happy. It's a competitive market, competitive landscape. If your website is slow, people will go elsewhere. But from a quality of service perspective, by positioning ourselves right in front of the Drupal server, we alleviate a lot of pressure from Drupal, which improves the quality of service and potentially reduces your infrastructure needs because potentially you need less Drupal servers to handle all those requests. And for those familiar with Varnish, you will probably have heard of our Varnish configuration language, or VCL. For those not, it's a domain-specific programming language that allows you to define the caching behavior. And if you use Varnish in the open source version, there's VCL snippets floating around. This is just an excerpt, an extract, where we design our VCL template to be in tune with the requirements of Drupal. If you see domains like this or URLs like this, please don't cache. We will remove cookies. All the tracking cookies will disappear. And we will only keep session cookies or no cache cookies, and then decide on the cacheability of that. And it's just part of a much bigger template that's floating around. I think this one is pointed to by the Varnish documentation page on Drupal.org. But also inside Drupal, there is a lot of capabilities there. I'm using the purge and the purge HTTP modules to offer this type of caching, to invalidate it, to make sure Drupal can connect to the cache when changes happen. Content is added, content is deleted, content is updated, we will be made aware of it. And that happens based on tags. So there is this set expression that allows you to have the tags coming from Drupal and to send them to Varnish to ensure that we remove the right tags from the cache. While that is great, we see some obstacles and some limitations, and what I'm going to try doing in the remaining 10 minutes is to show how we could tackle those. Now, we're a company that builds enterprise-grade software, and we fully recognize and acknowledge that not every organization sitting here qualifies as that. Sometimes the budgets aren't there. So what we did is we actually handpicked a selection of features that are part of our commercial product and packaged them as a mid-tier product at a much reduced price. If you would ask me how much reduced, I'd say a 90% reduction to just meet that mid-tier market, because I think in this room there'll be a lot more mid-tier organizations and enterprise organizations. And we handpicked those features, which I'm going to cover. You can scan the QR code if you're interested. If you leave, I can actually see our booth from the glimpse there in between the doors. So if you go outside, you can talk to us, we can show you more. But long story short, we have native TLS in Varnish Enterprise, which is not available in Varnish Cache. So if you use Varnish open source, you need some sort of TLS proxy. We've taken that need away by handling port 80 and 443 and even allowing that on the back end. So purely from an operational point of view, your Varnish D runtime process all of a sudden can have an HTTPS listening port, and you have Varnish ADM runtime commands to manage certificates on the fly. Also being able to reload certificates dynamically without emptying the cache, without restarting the process. You can mention these commands that you need in a configuration file to load the certificates, and that will be bootstrapped every time you start Varnish. So that's TLS at the front end without the need of this annoying TLS proxy. At the back end side, you can enable SSL equals 1, point your port at 443. The other three options, SSL, SNI, verify, peer, verify, host, they default to true, but I still wanted to mention them. And all of a sudden you have end-to-end TLS. That's one feature. Feature number 2 is a feature so nice I had to make this ridiculous illustration. It's the memory governor. It governs the memory. So what does that mean? It means that we limit the size of the Varnish process rather than just the storage. So here's a common misconception. This is how most people would deploy Varnish. The size of the cache will depend. So let's say you associate 8 gigabytes of RAM. For a lot of people that means, oh, my Varnish is going to use 8 gigabytes. That is not the case. What it happens is it associates 8 gigabytes of storage where you can store stuff in memory. But all the stuff regarding to maybe traffic, maybe thread handling, that comes on top of that. And if you didn't dimension your server properly, you can go out of memory. So what we've done is we offered in that package our massive storage engine and give you the memory governor, which will dynamically resize the cache based on runtime requirements. So if you have a sudden onslaught of traffic, thousands of threads are being created for that marketing campaign, you hit prime time news. Well, all of a sudden, you need that memory, so we'll resize the cache slightly and do that dynamically. Factory setting is to associate 80% of your server's memory. But you can tune that. You can define a memory target runtime parameter and set it to another percentage or to an absolute value. That was feature number 2. Feature number 3, which is arguably the most important one for Drupal, is tag-based cache invalidation with soft purge support. So here again, Drupal. If you want to use the purge or the purge HTTP module, you will connect to Varnish. You will choose which type of invalidation you're doing. We're choosing tag here, which is a first-class citizen in Drupal. And you're going to, again, specify those tags. And these are what the tags look like. So this is for the Docker image, the standard Drupal Docker image. I created a test page. And here's one of those tags, node equals 1, and then you have a bunch of other stuff. This is returned as a response header, and this is cached. And the current implementation actually uses this kind of VCL. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to go into every line of code, but let me just highlight what's important. We're using this ban function. This lives in the public VCL file that you can get off GitHub. We're actually matching it to a header using regular expression headers and patterns. And it doesn't perform that well at super large scale because every ban needs to be matched against every object in the cache. If you have 1 million objects in the cache and you do a lot of cache invalidations, this will it'll increase your CPU usage quite a bit and it will slow down. So what we've done is we have a module that's optimized for that and does tags natively. So by injecting that in your code, we are analyzing the purge cache tags header, checking for the separator, which is by default in Drupal a space, and tag them separately. These are primitives within our engine. And then we can assign our own tags like everything, which means remove everything from the cache if you match that tag. And you can leverage that. Like we've created a drop-in replacement in the standard VCL file that uses those pure tags, which are much more efficient in terms of execution. But the kicker is this one, this true value right here. By setting this to true, you effectively have soft purging, which is a major deal in content management, also in e-commerce, like Magento, Shopware, all these frameworks could really leverage that. And the key is, if you do soft purging, the object won't be removed from the cache. However, it will be marked as expired, and we will serve stale content to the user while doing an asynchronous revalidation at the origin at Drupal, ensuring that if you invalidate a lot of content, you're not sitting on empty objects and you don't have all these cache misses, meaning the quality of experience will still be good. Yes, people get stale content, but it'll be updated in a matter of seconds. And the way that works is by using this equation. This is how Varnish works. The total lifetime of an object is the sum of its TTL, which is a moving target. It starts maybe at an hour if you set it to an hour, and it drops to 0, and it can go below 0. It's also the sum of that, grace, and keep. So the TTL will be set to 0 by soft purging. If you match those tags, all those objects will be set to 0. But because there is grace left, and the sum of those keeps the total object lifetime above 0, we're able to do those asynchronous revalidations. And keep is irrelevant in this context, but I just still wanted to mention it. So by setting it to 0, we leave the grace and keep intact and allow you to do like asynchronous revalidation. And this is pretty much kept alive by setting this grace value in the VCL file. By setting it to 3 days, the object sticks around for a maximum of 3 days past the expiration. It doesn't mean that people will get the old content for 3 days. We just keep it around until the first asynchronous revalidation. All right, last in line, DNS resolution. Bit of a worrisome thing in open source. When you define this backend, Drupal.example.com will be only DNS resolved once. When we start Varnish and the VCL compilation takes place, we'll resolve the host name, and we expect one IP address to be returned. Which is kind of problematic if things change at runtime in orchestrated environments, auto-scaling, modern cloud-native architectures. Those values can change, and it could be multiple values. One of the things we offer in this special offer for you is 2 proprietary vmods, Varnish modules, Active DNS and UDO. So what will happen is you define a backend template which doesn't point to any IP address but has SSL on, and a health probe that points to this favicon. And then we'll do an active DNS group, which will resolve Drupal.example.com, injects the port, and overrides any DNS rule that there is. So you can force DNS and say, we do a DNS cache of 5 seconds. So every time the backend gets called, every 5 seconds a new DNS resolution happens. And the output is being sent to those templates. And then ultimately, our director object will subscribe to changes at the DNS level. And if we get more than one result, we'll perform a set of distributions. Could be random, could be hash, could be fallback. So every time you call this, active DNS kicks in, and we're good to go. I have 3 more minutes according to my clock. So if we look at DNS resolution in general using the dig command on Linux or Mac, if DrupalExample.com has 2 results, we'll resolve those and maybe do randomization. But you can upgrade that from basic DNS-based load balancing to DNS-based service discovery, because our module also supports the illustrious SRV record. Who's familiar with SRV records here? A couple of people. It's kind of interesting. It's a DNS record that has a special notation, and it captures more than IP addresses. It has the endpoint host names, which could be A records, but also the ports that Drupal could live on, or other services. And it has weights and priorities. So all of a sudden, you can set up your entire inventory of Drupal servers in one DNS record with the ports, with the priority. So in this case, Drupal 1 and Drupal 2 will have the priority. There'll be randomization going through, connecting to them. And if those 2 fail, well, Drupal 3 will be there. All of this is managed in a single DNS record, which plays nicely, of course, in a Kubernetes environment, where you have an internal DNS service. So if you have a Drupal service in Kubernetes, you can call Drupal.whatever. But if you want to elevate that to service discovery, in that Drupal service, you might have a TCP named port called HTTPS. We'll be able to resolve that one. We'll be able to use that one. And all of these features, and this is where I wrap up, are contained in a single VCL file. And that VCL file is the standard Drupal VCL, but fed with all these extra features that will take your caching to the next level. So with that being said, Thank you for sticking with me the last 15 minutes. There's more content coming, so I'll leave the stage. Thank you for the applause. I wasn't expecting that. This was good. And do pay us a visit. You leave the door, you walk straight to us. Maybe you want to check out some other sessions first, because we don't want to hinder the other sponsors. But a sincere thank you. See you next time. Enjoy the conference.